Bienvenue à Patroma Therapy. Bienvenue à Florida. Bienvenue à Key West. Allons-y visiter le musée de Hemingway. Comment ça va aujourd'hui?
Hey, was that French? Because I only know como ça va, which means how are you? But then again, it could be Spanish. So I pardon my French. I am totally oblivious of what you've just said.
Okay, I said bienvenue à Patroma Therapy. Welcome to Patroma Therapy. Bienvenue à Florida. Welcome to Florida. Aujourd'hui, today, we will visit the House and Museum of Hemingway. How are you today? No, I also said allons-y, which means let's go.
Oh, well, you speak a perfect French. I think you'd have made a natural French native speaker if you were in Paris right now.
Well, when I went to Paris the first time, I was very young. I was very excited about speaking French. Was reading the classics. I was reading Descartes and Pascal and Montesquieu. I was reading all those in high school, and I was super excited. I was very, fluent in reading. And so I get there and I go to a little boulangerie, and I'm like 15 years old or something. And I go into this little, bakery, boulangerie, and I say something like, I want a baguette in French. And this little rude Frenchman says, oh, you're an American. You don't even speak French. Don't even try. But he said it in French.
Well, he was a rude one. He was a rude one. But when I speak of French, I always think of Tolstoy. And here's why. Because I tried to read War and Peace. War and Peace? Yeah, that War and Peace novel a few times. And the characters use French so prominently, even when in casual conversations, like it's not...
it's just
nothing for them. Like, it's okay. And I don't understand a word because Tolstoy, half of it, I think, is written in French. The dialogues are all in French, especially when Napoleon talks to his officers and stuff. And I feel like stupid when reading it. Each time I read it, I think I should learn French. But then again, the day is over, I go to sleep and it starts all over again.
Okay. Well, the thing is that French was à la mode, which means popular. So the dressing, the having a French governess, the styles of clothes, the shoes, the hats, the pâtisserie, the cooking, French cuisine and art and culture permeated, 19th century culture and late 18th century culture. And there's just some expressions that just sound perfect in French, like n'importe quoi means it doesn't matter. For example, if you were saying something to me in English, like, well, how did you like the episode yesterday? And I said, oh, it was good. I liked it. I think maybe I was a little angry. Oh, n'importe quoi, allons-y, which means don't worry about it. Let's just keep going, which just means I'm not going to worry about yesterday. I just want to go ahead and record for today. So there's some expressions that exist in Russian or in French or in Spanish or in Turkish that just don't translate, but they're perfect in the language that they're in.
Yeah, but when I read it, I think of myself like being a peasant or a farm boy, as you said the other day, because at the time, in Anna Karenina too, the nobility, the characters, they speak French to each other because there was a reason for it. They didn't want the aristocracy. They didn't want the simple people to understand the servants. They didn't want them to understand what they talked about.
And also it was the language of the court. So the French were, the French ambassadors were coming and going into, what was it? Petersburg or Leningrad or what was it back in the day? The ambassadors were coming and going. Also in Istanbul, it was very interesting to me when I went to Istanbul in the beginning of the 1990s. I'm an American. I'm from Texas. I'm going to visit my future in-laws and my husband's, my future ex-husband's family. And so I think that I'm going to be speaking Turkish because I've been reading and studying a little bit of Turkish. Everybody wanted to speak to me in French. When people knew that I could speak French, they wanted to practice French with me. I could hardly get anyone to speak Turkish with me. A couple neighbors had a tea party. They were super excited that, like, the fiance, which would be me, that I could speak French. And so the only thing they wanted to do was like speak to me in French. And like the French I knew was about like philosophy and poetry. And anyhow, they were quite fascinated by me. And I was just trying to find someone that would help me, learn more Turkish. But yeah, allons-y, like, let's go. Like, allons-y à la bibliothèque, like, let's go to the library. Allons-y à la chambre à coucher, let's go to the bedroom.
Do you think that Ernest Hemingway spoke French?
Well, he lived in France and he was an expatriate and he was in Paris. And of course he did, bien sûr. Bien sûr means of course. So today's episode is about the house and the museum of Ernest Hemingway, who was an American expatriate. So his patria, his country is the United States, but he's living in Paris, like F. Scott Fitzgerald, John Dos Passos, and his house and museum is located in Key West, Florida. So from the cover shot, you can see this home of his. And what do you like about the cover shot? Just seeing his house, kind of for the first time. If you were just looking at the
that is my first time when I get to see a picture of his house. I came across this video accidentally because I was trying to find something again that I can't forget about the two stories we read, that Feels Like White Elephants and also The Cat in the Rain. But somehow this video came up, and I thought, wow, that's a nice house. And then it said, well, Ernest Hemingway house in Key West. I don't even know where it is. I suppose it's Florida. But then again, well, yeah, I don't know where it is.
Florida is, think of it as like a boot. It's like a long, it's like Sicily.
Like in Italy.
Yeah, it's like Sicily, or, well, Italy is sticking out and it's kicking the boot of Sicily. So Hemingway, he's known as a short story writer and a journalist. And, he was born in 1899 in Illinois, and he died in 1961. And he had a couple of sons, Jack Hemingway, Patrick Hemingway, a daughter, Gloria Hemingway. And he's a premier short story writer. So just like Chekhov is known as a short story writer, Flannery O'Connor, short story writer, Borges, short story writer, their homes have become fascination pieces where people would like to go and visit and walk around and see, well, what was it like to live in such a house? I really like that house of Hemingway. I have been down to Key West, but as per usual, every amazing place I was with the wrong person. But anyhow, I didn't get to go into the museum.
Well, that could be the line which Ernest Hemingway's story starts, or Anton Chekhov starts, or even Tolstoy could have used that line for his novel if he was alive. But when I think of this house, I am remodeling, if you allow me to use this word, because my house, my summer house, is like Ernest Hemingway's house in no way. And I thought, wow, this is a nice house, because when you start to build your own house, you always take ideas from other people's homes. And I thought, well, I have a cat and he had a cat, and I read somewhere that his house is a home for, I don't know, a great number of cats. Or maybe it was when he was alive, maybe it is now. Like, it's populated by cats mostly. And I thought, wow.
Yeah. It's like, well, first of all, think of the location. Your house, your summer house, is in a very cold part of the world, and you enjoy it in the summer, and you have nice windows, and you have plants, and you have a cat, It's very charming. You like to chop wood and make things and cook things. Hemingway's house is located in a very, very warm part of the United States. So it's warm all the time. And there's big porches where you can sit on the porch and feel the breeze. It's 2 stories. You need to build a second story. Well, but see, a second story for you isn't going to work. Like you're going
No,
to
second story is not the problem. I mean, there are houses, lots of houses which has second story, but the beauty of it, it's kind of green, light green. I don't know, the palms all over it around, and the green lawns in front of it. The green tints, and somehow just spoke to me. Do you know what I
Yes,
mean?
oh yes, it's a very charming color. Also, if you can imagine getting up in the morning and you're wearing like a cotton shirt, maybe some shorts or pajama pants, and you just walk out onto the patio with your bare feet, or maybe you have slippers like Stephen Arkadovich. Was that his name? Arkadovich?
Stepan
Anyhow,
Arkadьевич, yeah, I
yeah,
know
so
Steve.
you're just up on the patio and your wife or girlfriend or some other people staying at the house bring some coffee up to you and a couple pieces of fruit. So it's a wonderful place for living.
Yeah, but was he rich? Because that's supposed to be, I don't know, wealthy people can afford the house, I'm sure.
No, not in the United States. Everybody can afford a house. We have credit. No, what I'm
Okay, but
saying
if
is,
you don't,
no, what I mean is that Hemingway worked as an ambulance driver in the American military. He was an ambulance driver and he was a writer. And he lived outside of the United States because it was so cheap to live outside of the United States. For example, right now, there's a lot of people that have summer homes in Italy. They have summer homes in Turkey, in Bodrum, in, in France. It's cheaper to live outside of the United States right now than it is to live inside the United States. So quite a few people have left Dallas for the summer and they're just gone. And they're in France, or they're in Turkey, or they're in Italy, or whatever. And then now that school is starting, September the 5th is generally coming back to school. The families have returned to Dallas, to the brutal heat and the expensive prices and inflation and politics and all the things that make you crazy. So the expatriates back in the 1920s, found it much cheaper to live the la bon vivant, the life, the good life outside of the United States. Like you could get pastry, you could get wine, you could get cheese for a fraction of the price that it costs to live in the United States. So these expatriates, Gertrude Stein and Dos Passos and Fitzgerald, they're all in Europe because that's where it's happening. And in the story of The Lady and the Cat, in the story, there are 2 characters, and these characters are Americans living abroad. And that story is based on some experiences that, Hemingway himself had. I feel like I talked
that speaks a lot about, man. If you, I mean, the apartment, if you say, or the house speaks a lot about what this man like. And judging on, you said he was an ambulance driver or just.
Well, he was in the military. He did military service, but he just drove an ambulance around. And probably, if you're driving an ambulance, it's kind of like driving a truck. You can just drink and like meet women and like just be stupid. I mean, it's not like running up on the battlefield with a gun. If you're driving a truck in the military, or if you're driving an ambulance, well, he went around and he picked up bloody bodies, but he also drank a lot too, and he was working in World War I. He was working for the American Red Cross, and he wasn't even 19 years old yet. So he was 18 years old in World War I, and he's driving an ambulance, and he fell in love with a nurse, a Red Cross nurse, because there's like all kinds of cool girls, and she didn't even want to marry him.
You know that who else was the ambulance driver besides Ernest Hemingway? The Walt Disney.
Walt Disney?
No, not Chekhov. Chekhov was a doctor, but Walt Disney was the ambulance driver, just like Ernest Hemingway. I remember that.
Wow.
Mm.
Wow. Well, it's
Uh,
interesting because we read these books and they're actually real. They're written by real people. Like we tend to kind of mythologize our heroes. I sometimes don't understand that like Chekhov was a real person, that Chekhov ate breakfast and Chekhov, took a nap, or that Hemingway was out on his porch thinking about writing a story. And it's very exciting to see these homes where people live. I think you were telling me that outside of Moscow is it a Tolstoy house or is it a Chekhov house outside of Moscow, about an hour or so?
Tolstoy.
Well, when Hemingway wrote The Sun Also Rises, that was his first novel. He wrote that in 1926, and many people had left the United States and were living in Europe, and they were called the Lost Generation because they were just living the life of leisure, just drinking and smoking, and a whole bunch of people getting a house and having a weekend together. They were going sailing. They were going to the bullfights. They were they were just living life, and they didn't have to have money to do it because these were Americans with American dollars in Europe.
Well, somehow you just keep saying that Ernest Hemingway writer, Chekhov writer. I'm thinking of Jack London. I read this story, I guess, To Build a Fire, about men who got frozen in, I think, in Canada, or maybe, I don't know, up north. And he tried to find his way out, but he couldn't. And yeah, that was written by Jack London. And I thought, when I read it, I thought, wow, Jack London, story style seems very similar to what Hemingway wrote. I thought those two are, like, they don't know each
Yeah.
other, but they
Well,
wrote.
Hemingway influenced the writing style because the two extremes in American prose are William Faulkner, which is the long, long extended sentence with embedded description, and Hemingway, which is staccato, short, descriptive, tight writing. So, when Hemingway came back to the United States, he was in Cuba for a while, and then he did a trip to Africa, and then he was in a plane crash. So he was very much, busy about life. He liked to go deep sea fishing, and so when he comes back to this house in Key West is a point in Florida where he has built this house, and he had met Fidel Castro. He had done so much living that he's really kind of an exciting man if you're not in a relationship with him.
I think I would have made a good writer too, but then again, I don't have so many stories to write. And both Hemingway and Jack London, I think they believe that life to be lived, to be written about. I think because all these stories, I don't know where to get them from. Either they lived them through, or they had acquaintances who, or maybe the characters who lived this story.
No, well, I mean, we have, if you go back a few seasons before in Petroma Therapy, we have a couple episodes on writing stories and writing poems, and you shared with our audience a story about a little boy who goes to school and he has an uncle who has kind of fallen in love with his teacher, and this little boy goes on this adventure. And then I wrote a story about this woman who's standing on a porch looking out at her backyard, and her husband's on the inside sleeping. So some of the elements of my story are from real life, and possibly some of the elements of your story are from real life. I mean, actually, if you pay attention to life, it's full of amazing details. Now, I don't want to like make you sad, but I know that's part of where we have to go. Hemingway was also preoccupied with death, and his father had shot himself, and Hemingway himself, he shot himself with a shotgun. He'd been married 4 times, and he had depression and anxiety. He'd gone to the Mayo Clinic for electric shock treatment because he had cancer or something towards the end.
But how old was he? He lived 75, 78? How was he? Ernest Hemingway.
Wait a minute. Just a second. Okay, well, he divorced in 1927. He divorced again in 1940. He divorced again in 1945. He divorced again in 1946.
Lots of divorces.
Yeah, so he kind of like moved through women quite fast. But
then again, the divorce is hard. But so is marriage. Marriage is also hard. Anyway, go on.
Okay, so he was born in 1899, so let's say that's 1900, and he died in 1961, so he was only 60 years old.
Well, that's what separates him from Chekhov and London, because Chekhov died at 40, I think, or 42, but London, he died quite young, relatively speaking. He died at 42. He went to bed, I think, saying that his stomach is not well or something like that, and then here we go. It's funny how we think we're going to live forever, but the day comes when we're not.
Well, on a lighter note, I just want to say that, no, the thing is, we're alive today, and it was very interesting because we were thinking of possibly interviewing today Jaredon, who is kind of a philosopher truck driver, who had a fox that came in from his farmland into his wife's bedroom, which I think is going to make a great story. But he contacted me this morning because while he was out on the road, he was away from his home, and some of the family members were also away from the home. And there was a man who broke into his home. And I think his daughter was upstairs during this break-in. And the guy stole all this meat in a freezer and then ran away. And the police have been looking for this guy who broke in. And he just, right before I picked up the phone call for trauma therapy, Jaredon says they've caught the thief. So, Jaredon is not like a super intellectual academician, like he doesn't come out of the Academy of Writing, but he's a great storyteller. And I think that anybody that can tell a story can be a good writer.
Well, I'm thinking, what would I do if somebody just broke into my house and because No, I'm thinking that if you are all forgiven and stuff, and the Good Samaritan, you'd probably invite them all the way in and say, guys, come on, we have a bottle of Jack Daniels. Don't you want to share it with me and stuff? I thought, what effect would that have on them and the?
Well, these are guys that are these are meth heads. So they have meth labs. They're manufacturing meth in the woods, and so they're crazy, they're on drugs, and they've got guns. They don't give a F about having a drink with you. They're going to just shoot you and take everything out. I'm just saying, when guns and drugs are involved, it's very hard to be friendly with people. I don't know. What are you going to do with this guy? He's broken in, he's stolen all your meat, your daughter's upstairs, and you go, well, let's have a drink. What are you going to do after he sits at the table? Chat with him? What will you do? I'm very curious. I'm fascinated.
From a religious metaphysics, or I don't know, religious points of view. Well, normally I would have killed the guy because I have a shotgun and property and trespass and stuff. But then I think, what if redemption and all is a real thing? So wouldn't you want to invite the lost soul who broke into your house and ask him what is going on?
No. For example, I live in an apartment complex before the pandemic, and there's a lot of drugs, alcohol, fentanyl, meth, drugs, guns, trafficking goes on in Dallas. And I left to go to Portland, Oregon for 2 weeks. There's only one person that had the key to my apartment. While I was gone, I had a student named Tanya who was going to come here and just check on my apartment and water my plants. She texted me that there was a sign on my car that said I had backed into somebody, that I owed somebody money. Well, the car hadn't moved because the car's been sitting there and I'm in Portland. Then she came by another night to check, and a guy had a baseball bat and bashed in my right light, the back of my lights, bashed it in, saying I better pay or I'm going to pay one way or the other. So this happened about 4 or 5 years ago. So I asked Tanya, wanted to know what to do. I said, drive the car away from there, drive it to where you live. So she came with her sister, drove the car away. Then I came back. I think Alex picked me up at the airport. So there was no car at my apartment, but this person knows I live there. And I got my car back. So I'm driving it. I drove my car back onto the property, and a guy is following me. So as soon as I get out of my car, he's going to like hit me or steal my purse, or he's already smashed my car back light. So I don't let anybody into my apartment, and I live by myself. So if anybody nobody, I don't allow anyone to come over. So I put a little Jesus card on my car near to where the lock. I just put a little Jesus card there. And then I heard this guy like banging on my door. And I thought, if I show fear, they will keep after me. If I show any fear, they will keep after me. So I did not have a gun. I'm a woman. I'm single. I opened the door and shouted at this guy, "Get the F out of here." And he ran away. So these are people with guns and drugs, and I don't really care about the dude's salvation. I'm just trying to stay alive. It was very scary. Like I could die. Like, self-defense. I didn't even have a weapon. I'm a pacifist. I will never have a weapon.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm thinking if somebody tried to broke into Ernest Hemingway house, and imagine that Ernest Hemingway comes into his home after work, and see that they sort that the door was open a crack, for instance, and his first thought would be, "Oh shit! Now all the kids are gone because they forgot to close the door."
But see, he lived with a bunch of people. There were people there all the time, eating and drinking and spending the night. So the house was not just one man and one woman with a door. These were expatriates. So that means they would have people come and stay for 10 days, people come and stay for 4 days. People come in, they had a maid, they had a servant, they had a couple of cats wandering around. So probably no one would break in because there's always someone around. They probably had a gardener, because this is off of Key West, and they're Cubans that will come and they will work and they will live there because they can make more money if they get American dollars. I don't know, like if you're isolated, like I think you told me that your summer house is kind of maybe in a little bit secluded area, and there's a few neighbors, but they're also sort of secluded. Depends on what's around the place.
Yeah.
Gosh, I'm sweating. I'm hyperventilating. Let me drink some water.
I feel sad. Can we wrap it up on here on that, because I don't know, something happened.
Okay. Well, so to our viewers, we're very happy that Jerridan's police in Minnesota have caught the criminal and will be bringing him to justice. But the thing is, when there's one criminal, there's always two criminals. So probably the criminal has a brother who will be back. And there's a saying that I always remember. Like they say, if this bad thing didn't kill you this time, it'll kill you next time. So like, really glad that the criminal was captured. Pretty sure that the criminal's brothers are out there in the woods someplace, really mad. We've enjoyed taking you on a tour of Hemingway's house. Has beautiful porches, palm trees. The cats that wander through the property. What has happened is that the cats had baby cats, kittens, and then those cats had some kittens. So there are cats and kittens around the property. And I think you said out at your property, you had a cat that had some kittens. Is that true?
Yeah, but that I neutered them as of late because they started to multiply in geometrical progression. So that's what the only option left for me. I feel bad about that. No, not only feel sad, I also feel bad.
Worse than shooting them is neutering. Would you rather be shot?
I imagine that somebody would have neutered me, for instance. Also, I'm not that productive, but I could be then again.
Especially if you were neutered,
If I were a cat. Yeah. Okay, I think we gotta wrap it up because somehow we drifted off a little bit of the subject of today's discussion.
We're completely on topic. And
okay.
I just wanted to say that the Topkapi Saray is a beautiful palace built on the peninsula in Istanbul. So it's a peninsula again, just like Hemingway's peninsula. And also, Italy is like a boot. So Topkapi Saray is a palace. And in the palace, the Sultan had a harem. And guess who guarded the harem? Beautiful women from all over the world. Guess who guarded those women? Eunuchs. EUNACH.
It's awful. Yeah, I know people do that to other people in the Middle Ages, but it's even worse than neutered cat. But then again, what can I do?
And on this note, we're going to wrap up the episode and say au revoir and adios, auf Wiedersehen.
Bye-bye.